When Phil Robertson, the patriarch of the Robertson family, and the man who became a household name through the hit reality show Duck Dynasty, passed away in May 2025, the world as fans and followers was filled with sadness. His family, however, faced a mixture of grief, anticipation, and unexpected surprises. Phil had spent his life preaching simplicity, faith, and discipline. He had built an empire from nothing, navigating the hardships of rural Louisiana, raising a large family, and creating a brand that would become famous around the world. But in his final days, as his health declined, the Robertsons were forced to confront not just the loss of father and husband, but also the challenges of understanding the legacy he would leave behind. Phil Robertson's decline began subtly. In late 2024, the family revealed to the public that Phil had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Most fans imagined a slow and gradual decline, something that would stretch over many years. But inside the Robertson home, the truth was far more painful. Alzheimer's progressed quickly, eroding not just Phil's memory, but also his physical strength. He began misplacing objects, repeating questions, and pausing in the middle of conversations as he tried to recall what he wanted to say. These small signs were frightening for the family because they hinted at a man who had been unshakable for decades, slowly losing control over his own body and mind. Phil had hunted through storms, spoken boldly about faith, and lived by his personal code without compromise. Yet Alzheimer's forced him into a battle that no amount of discipline or courage could overcome. His children, who had grown up witnessing their father's strength and resilience, were unprepared for this reality. By April 2025, his son Jace revealed on the Unashamed podcast that Phil's condition had worsened. "He's not good," he said simply, reflecting the quiet despair that the family had been enduring behind closed doors. Phil, once a figure of authority and stability, was now dependent on his family for simple tasks, and even speaking for extended periods left him exhausted. Despite the illness, Phil remained calm. He had spoken about death for many years without fear, believing that death was not an ending, but a transition to something greater. He often told his children, "Don't cry when I die. Dance, sing, but don't cry." While he wanted them to honor his final request, when the moment arrived, even his closest family members found it impossible to follow his instructions. His passing was quiet, occurring at home in the early hours of May 25th, 2025, surrounded by loved ones. He was 79 years old. The emotional weight of his death was immense, and the family's grief was compounded the next day when they gathered to hear Phil's final instructions, which would reveal both a fortune and deeply personal messages meant to guide each of them in life after his passing. In the days following his death, the Robertson family convened in the lawyer's office to open Phil's will and read the letters he had prepared for each of them. This moment was more emotional than any funeral service or public tribute could ever be. Phil had not left behind simply a sum of money or instructions for dividing assets. He had left handwritten letters that contained confessions, apologies, blessings, and guidance for the future. Each letter explained why he had allocated certain assets in a specific way, what he hoped his children would do with them, and how he wanted them to continue his legacy. Phil's net worth, estimated to be between $10 million and $15 million, came from decades of hard work, including Duck Commander, the Duck Dynasty show, book deals, licensing agreements, and years of public speaking and podcasting. Yet the real impact of his estate was not financial. It was deeply personal and symbolic. Miss Kay, his wife of over 50 years, received full ownership of the family estate, a property that had been a part of their family life since the early days when resources were scarce, and meals often depended on what Phil could catch in the swamps. Their eldest son, Alan, who had served as a pastor, received Phil's collection of religious writings, reflecting his lifelong dedication to faith. Jason Jeep, who had been involved in the family business, received shares of Duck Commander with instructions to maintain the traditions and principles Phil had built over decades. Phyllis, a daughter Phil had discovered later in life, was given land along with a heartfelt apology for the years she had spent not knowing her father. Willie, who had taken Duck Commander into mainstream success, inherited the controlling stake in the company, along with a note emphasizing protection of the family's faith and legacy. For the Robertsons, the tears that came were not merely for the money or assets they inherited, but for the realization of what they had lost in Phil's passing. Each letter reminded them of the lessons, sacrifices, and values that had defined Phil Robertson's life, a man who rose from poverty in Louisiana, embraced faith, overcame personal struggles, and created a family and empire that now bore his name. Phil Robertson's early life was marked by hardship and resilience. Born in 1946 in a poor Louisiana family, he grew up in a home where hunting and fishing were not hobbies but necessities. Meals often depended on what could be gathered from the swamps, teaching him self-reliance from a young age. This upbringing instilled in Phil qualities of toughness, defiance, and a deep skepticism of anything that pulled him away from nature and hard work. Beyond survival, he was naturally gifted. His athletic talent earned him a football scholarship to Louisiana Tech University, where he became the starting quarterback in 1966 and 1967. Interestingly, his backup at the time was Terry Bradshaw, who would later become an NFL legend. Despite the potential for fame and a professional sports career, Phil chose a different path. In his own words, he preferred hunting ducks over risking injury in football. This decision reflected a consistent theme in Phil's life, valuing freedom, faith, and family over worldly success or recognition. In 1972, he transformed his passion for hunting into a business, founding Duck Commander. Operating out his home, he carved duck calls by hand and shipped orders personally. Miss Kay, pregnant at the age of 17, supported him through these early hardships, raising their children while enduring financial instability. Slowly but steadily, the business grew, eventually exploding in success when Willie returned from college with a vision to modernize operations. Together, the family built an empire that would become the foundation of both their fortune and their cultural impact. Each letter in Phil's will reflected this journey, reminding the children that they were inheriting not just money, but decades of sacrifices, lessons, and family values encoded into the fabric of Duck Commander and their personal histories. The rise of Duck Dynasty in 2012 brought Phil Robertson into homes of millions of viewers. Initially intended as a simple reality show about a family running a small duck call business, the series quickly evolved into a cultural phenomenon. At its peak, more than 11 million viewers tuned in each week to watch the Robertson family navigate life, faith, and business with authenticity and humor. Phil, with his long beard, blunt personality, and unwavering convictions, became the show's centerpiece. What audiences saw on television was the same Phil Robertson who had lived through the swamps of Louisiana, the hardships of early marriage, and the slow building of an empire. Fame did not soften him. If anything, it amplified his voice. In 2013, a GQ interview catapulted him into one of the most notable controversies of his career. He spoke candidly on topics of faith, race, and sexuality, leading to public backlash, a temporary suspension from A&E, and heated debates across media and social platforms. Supporters rallied behind him, merchandise sold out, and he was soon reinstated, illustrating how polarizing yet influential his voice had become. Over time, Phil also became a fixture in conservative political circles, endorsing candidates and participating in public debates, all while remaining true to the values he held since his early conversion to Christianity. Through it all, the family navigated the pressures of fame, balancing public perception with private struggles, and maintaining the core of their identity built on faith, work, and togetherness. Phil Robertson's life was not without personal darkness. In his 20s and early 30s, he battled alcohol, violence, and anger that at times threatened to destroy his marriage and family. Miss Kay, married at 17 and suddenly thrust into adulthood, bore the brunt of these struggles while maintaining a home filled with faith and patience. Phil himself later reflected on these years, admitting that he often abandoned his family for days at a time, consumed by drinking and reckless behavior. The turning point came when he experienced a personal and spiritual awakening in a small church in West Monroe. Phil embraced Christianity with full conviction, rebuilding his marriage, apologizing to his children, and channeling his energy into creating a better life. This conversion reshaped the Robertson family's trajectory. Faith became the cornerstone of the family business, public appearances, and personal conduct. The values Phil instilled through this period became not just lessons, but guiding principles, shaping every interaction, decision, and future endeavor. It was these principles, alongside his hard work and resilience, that underpinned the fortune and legacy he ultimately left behind. As Phil Robertson's children grew, so did the family business. Duck Commander, once a small home-based operation, evolved into a multi-million-dollar empire under the guidance of his sons, particularly Willie Robertson, who brought a modern perspective and ambition to the brand. Each family member played a role, not just in operations, but in maintaining the family's values. Phil's letters reflected this. He didn't just leave instructions for dividing wealth. He left guidance on responsibilities, ethics, and tradition. He emphasized that Duck Commander was more than a business. It was a reflection of the Robertson family's perseverance, faith, and hard work. In his will, he outlined how each child should engage with the business, not just to maintain profits, but to honor the culture he had built. Willie, inheriting the controlling stake, was entrusted not merely with authority, but with the responsibility to protect both the company's success and the moral foundation upon which it was built. Jace and Jeep were reminded to uphold traditions, ensuring that innovation never overshadowed the principles Phil cherished. These instructions, combined with personal letters, highlighted how Phil valued character over money. For Phyllis, who had grown up distant from the family, the land and apology were reminders that relationships and reconciliation mattered as much as inheritance. Miss Kay, receiving the family estate, was entrusted with a symbol of family continuity and unity, representing decades of shared hardship, triumph, and devotion. Phil Robertson's estate was therefore not just a financial plan. It was a manual for living, shaped by decades of experience and lessons learned through struggle, failure, faith, and redemption. The letters became tangible evidence of his desire to guide his children even after his death, revealing a side of Phil that many fans never saw. Tender, introspective, and deeply concerned with the moral and emotional welfare of his family. The reading of these letters brought the family to tears, not because of the wealth, but because they realized the depth of their father's love, thoughtfulness, and preparation. It became clear that his legacy was more than a fortune. It was a blueprint for life, combining values, ethics, and practical guidance that only a father with decades of experience could provide. The story of Duck Dynasty is inseparable from Phil Robertson himself. The show became a phenomenon, not only because of the humor or the quirks of its family members, but because Phil represented authenticity. Audiences were captivated by a man who lived by his convictions, worked hard, and remained unapologetically himself. He brought a combination of wit, wisdom, and blunt honesty that was rare in mainstream media. The show's success, at its peak reaching over 11 million viewers per week, illustrated a cultural appetite for characters rooted in traditional values, family unity, and faith. Beyond entertainment, Duck Dynasty sparked conversations about religion, lifestyle, and morality. Phil's approach, often controversial, led to debates that spread far beyond the show's fan base, including public discussions about faith, politics, and cultural norms. While critics sometimes saw him as inflexible or extreme, supporters viewed him as a man of principle, unwilling to compromise beliefs for popularity. This duality enhanced the show's cultural significance, making Phil Robertson both a beloved figure and a polarizing one. His public controversies, including comments on sexuality and race, became focal points for wider societal debates. Yet Phil remained steadfast in his beliefs, arguing that his words came from scripture and personal conviction. This unwavering stance only strengthened his identity as a man who lived according to his principles, a trait his family deeply respected. The influence of Duck Dynasty extended beyond television. Merchandise, books, and media appearances created a platform for the Robertson family's values to reach millions, solidifying Phil's impact on American culture. In this context, his will and the way he structured his estate were not just personal matters. They reflected a lifetime of shaping both family and public perception. Phil's decisions about inheritance demonstrated how intertwined his personal, professional, and spiritual life had become, emphasizing the importance of preserving legacy, values, and influence for future generations. Phil Robertson's journey was not one of unbroken success. In his 20s and early 30s, he faced personal battles that tested both his family and himself. Heavy drinking, anger, and reckless behavior caused turmoil at home, leaving Miss Kay to manage the household and care for their young children under tremendous stress. Phil admitted in later interviews that there were days when he abandoned his family completely, unsure if he would return sober, angry, or absent altogether. These years were dark, marked by instability and fear. The turning point came during a church visit in West Monroe, where Phil experienced a profound spiritual awakening. He embraced Christianity with a passion that would define the rest of his life, leading to a transformation that affected every aspect of his family. His conversion prompted him to rebuild his marriage, reconcile with his children, and dedicate himself fully to work, faith, and service. This redemption story became central to the Robertson family's identity. Faith became the foundation of Duck Commander, their public presence, and personal relationships. Phil's letters, prepared in the final months of his life, reflected this journey of redemption. They contained lessons about accountability, forgiveness, and living with purpose. His family recognized that the fortune he left behind was intertwined with a lifetime of growth, discipline, and spiritual commitment, beyond material wealth. Phil provided his children with examples of resilience, moral guidance, and the importance of prioritizing family and faith. These letters were the culmination of decades of learning from mistakes and embracing life's lessons, ensuring that even in death, Phil continued to guide and protect the family he loved. When the Robertson family gathered to read Phil Robertson's will, the experience was profoundly moving. Each envelope contained not only a financial allocation, but a message of love, guidance, and expectation. The letters emphasized personal responsibility, family loyalty, and faith, reminding each child of the values Phil cherished. Miss Kay received the family estate, symbolizing both her role as a family matriarch and the enduring partnership she shared with Phil. Alan received his father's religious writings, underscoring the importance of faith and reflection. Jace and Jeep were given shares of Duck Commander, along with specific instructions to maintain traditions and ethical practices. Phyllis, who had lived apart from the family for many years, received land and a letter of reconciliation, bridging a gap that had existed for decades. Willie's inheritance of the controlling state came with a message emphasizing protection of the family business, values, and public image. The impact of these letters went beyond the monetary value. For the family, the documents were tangible evidence of Phil's love, thoughtfulness, and careful planning. They represented a final opportunity for Phil to influence his children's lives positively, guiding them through decisions and responsibilities that would shape their future. The tears shed during the reading were a mix of grief and gratitude, reflecting both the loss of a father and the realization of his enduring presence in their lives through words and wisdom. It became clear that Phil's fortune was meaningful not because of its size, but because of the careful consideration and emotional depth embedded within each allocation. Phil Robertson's life and fortune were inseparable from his faith. Every decision he made, from founding Duck Commander to creation of television shows and books, was guided by his beliefs. Faith was a foundation upon which he built both his family and his business. For the Robertson children, this integration of personal values and professional responsibility became a guiding principle. In his will, Phil emphasized that financial inheritance was secondary to ethical stewardship and faithfulness. He reminded each child that wealth carried obligations, not just privileges, and that the continuation of Duck Commander required integrity, dedication, and respect for family traditions. This message was not lost on the Robertsons. The letters, combined with the fortune, created a moral and emotional framework that would influence how they conducted their lives, interacted with one another, and carried forward the family business. The intersection of faith, family, and business was at the core of Phil's philosophy. By embedding this principle into his estate, he ensured that his children understood the responsibilities that came with inheritance, demonstrating that wealth without values was meaningless. His foresight and planning exemplified a lifetime of experience, blending financial success with moral guidance, leaving the Robertson children not only assets, but enduring lessons on living purposefully. Phil Robertson's life offers lessons that go beyond reality television fame or wealth. His journey from a poor boy in Louisiana to the patriarch of a global brand illustrates the power of determination, faith, and resilience. He taught that personal failures can become opportunities for growth, and that redemption is always possible with dedication and reflection. His struggles with alcohol, anger, and early personal challenges highlight the importance of accountability, perseverance, and spiritual transformation. Furthermore, Phil demonstrated the value of prioritizing family and long-term principles over short-term gains. By carefully planning his estate and leaving personal letters alongside financial assets, he emphasized that wealth should be guided by ethics, love, and responsibility. These lessons resonate not only with the Robertson family, but also with viewers who have followed his story, providing a blueprint for navigating life's challenges while staying true to one's values. Phil's life serves as a reminder that personal legacy is not measured solely by material wealth, but by the positive influence one leaves behind in the lives of family, community, and future generations. Phil Robertson's passing marked the end of an era, but the legacy he left continues to shape his family and the broader public consciousness. His fortune, while significant, was only part of the story. The letters, personal guidance, and moral instructions he left behind ensured that his children would carry forward not just his wealth, but the lessons, faith, and values he had lived by. From his humble beginnings in Louisiana swamps to his rise as a cultural icon, Phil's life was defined by faith, perseverance, hard work, and dedication to family. His story is a testament to the idea that true legacy is measured not by money alone, but by the impact one has on the lives of others. For the Robertson family, the tears shed in the lawyer's office were not only for the father they lost, but also for profound understanding of the life lessons he embedded in every aspect of their inheritance. Phil Robertson left behind more than a fortune. He left a blueprint for living, a moral compass, and a story that will inspire generations to come. In the end, the family realized that his final gift was not the money, but the lessons of love, faith, and integrity that money could never buy. Phil Robertson, the patriarch of the Robertson family and the man behind Duck Dynasty, was a figure whose life story was as complex as it was inspiring. Born in 1946 in rural Louisiana, Phil grew up in a world where survival depended on skill, patience, and faith. His childhood was not easy. Meals were often scarce, and hunting was not a hobby. It was a necessity. Phil's family relied on what the swamp could provide, and every day was a challenge. These early experiences instilled in him a sense of discipline, resilience, and self-reliance that would guide him for the rest of his life. Even as a boy, he displayed a stubborn independence and a refusal to compromise his values, traits that would later define both his business and his family life. As he grew, Phil's athletic talents emerged. He excelled in sports, particularly football, earning a scholarship to Louisiana Tech. Here, he became a starting quarterback in 1966 and 1967, playing alongside future NFL legend Terry Bradshaw. But Phil's priorities were different. Despite opportunities for fame and professional success, he chose freedom and personal fulfillment over the demands of professional sports. He famously said, "I'd rather hunt ducks than have large, violent men stomp me in the dirt." This decision, while unconventional, reflected his deep commitment to living life on his own terms and staying connected to the values and environment he loved. In 1972, Phil Robertson turned his passion for hunting and craftsmanship into a small business, Duck Commander. Operating out of his home, he hand-carved duck calls and sold them one order at a time. The early years were marked by struggle. Phil's wife, Miss Kay, who had married him at just 17, supported him while raising their children. The family lived with barely enough money to get by, relying on faith, ingenuity, and hard work. Phil's determination to succeed without compromising his values became the cornerstone of Duck Commander. He emphasized integrity, craftsmanship, and perseverance. Over time, the business grew, slowly at first, then steadily, and eventually, with the help of his son Willie's vision for modernization, Duck Commander transformed into a multi-million-dollar empire. The company's success was not merely financial. It was a reflection of the Robertson family's unity, resilience, and dedication. Phil's leadership ensured that the business remained a family endeavor, with each child learning the importance of responsibility, tradition, and ethical conduct. This foundation laid the groundwork for what would later become Duck Dynasty, the television show that would introduce the world to the Robertsons and their unique blend of faith, family, and entertainment. In 2012, Duck Dynasty premiered on A&E, initially intended as a simple reality show about a family running a duck call business. However, the show quickly exploded into a cultural phenomenon, attracting millions of viewers each week. Audiences were captivated by Phil Robertson's personality, blunt, unapologetic, and deeply committed to his faith and family. The show highlighted the values that shaped the Robertson family: hard work, loyalty, and devotion to tradition. But with fame came scrutiny. In 2013, Phil's interview with GQ sparked controversy over his comments on race and sexuality. Critics accused him of intolerance, while supporters argued he was simply speaking his beliefs rooted in Scripture. Despite temporary suspension from the network and public backlash, Phil remained steadfast, refusing to apologize for his convictions. This duality, admired by some, criticized by others, cemented his status as a polarizing figure who stayed true to his principles. The show not only entertained but also sparked discussions about faith, morality, and culture, further solidifying the Robertson family's influence on American society. Duck Dynasty became more than a TV show. It was a platform for Phil's values, his family story, and the business he had built from scratch. Phil Robertson's life was not without personal battles. In his 20s and early 30s, he struggled with alcohol, anger, and reckless behavior. These challenges strained his marriage to Miss Kay and caused turmoil within the family. There were days when Phil would leave home, consumed by his personal demons, leaving his wife to hold the household together. The uncertainty and fear experienced by his children during these years left deep emotional marks. However, a turning point came during a visit to a small church in West Monroe. Phil experienced a spiritual awakening that reshaped his life. He embraced Christianity with conviction, rebuilt his marriage, and dedicated himself to his children, work, and faith. This redemption story became central to the Robertson family's identity. Phil's transformation influenced every aspect of their lives, from a family business to public appearances, and instilled in his children the importance of accountability, resilience, and faith. Even in his final months, as Alzheimer's slowly stole parts of his memory, his clarity of mind and unwavering convictions demonstrated the strength of his character and the depth of his spiritual foundation. In December 2024, Phil Robertson's family revealed that he had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. While many fans imagined a gradual decline, the reality was far more challenging. The disease progressed quickly, affecting not only his memory but also his physical strength. Simple tasks became increasingly difficult, and conversations were interrupted by forgetfulness and disorientation. Despite this, Phil maintained a calm and reflective attitude toward death. He often reminded his children not to cry, encouraging them to celebrate life rather than mourn. When Phil passed away on May 25, 2025, at the age of 79, he left behind a family prepared to grieve, yet unaware of the depth of the emotional impact his final instructions would have. The true weight of Phil Robertson's legacy emerged in the reading of his will. Each child received not only financial inheritance, but handwritten letters containing guidance, apologies, blessings, and ethical instructions. Miss Kay inherited the family estate. Alan received Phil's religious writings. Jace and Jeep were entrusted with shares of Duck Commander alongside responsibilities to preserve family traditions, and Phyllis received land and a heartfelt reconciliation letter. Willie, who had transformed Duck Commander into a mainstream brand, inherited the controlling stake with instructions to protect both the business and the family's moral legacy. These letters revealed that Phil valued love, guidance, and ethical stewardship more than wealth. His intent was clear. Inheritance carried responsibilities and expectations, ensuring that his family would honor the values he had lived by long after his passing. The emotional impact of these letters underscored the depth of Phil's thoughtfulness, demonstrated that his fortune was only a part of a much larger legacy of faith, family, and wisdom. Phil Robertson's life and fortune were inseparable from his faith. His beliefs guided every decision, from starting Duck Commander to participating in public life and managing his family. Through his letters and final instructions, Phil emphasized that inheritance carried moral obligations and responsibilities. He reminded his children that wealth alone was meaningless without integrity, accountability, and devotion to family and faith. His foresight ensured that Duck Commander remained not just a successful business, but a reflection of the family's principles. By embedding ethical guidance into his estate, Phil provided his children with a roadmap for navigating life's challenges while preserving the family's legacy. The combination of financial inheritance, personal letters, and moral instruction created a lasting impact, ensuring that Phil's values will continue to shape future generations. Phil Robertson's public life was marked by both admiration and criticism. While some celebrated his steadfast faith and traditional values, others criticized his outspoken comments on sensitive social issues. The GQ interview controversy of 2013 illustrated the tension between free expression beliefs and societal expectations. Despite backlash, Phil's popularity remained strong among conservative audiences, and Duck Commander merchandise sales soared. He became a figure in political and cultural discussions, endorsing figures such as Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, and contributing to debates about morality, religion, and family values. These controversies, while challenging, reinforce Phil's identity as a man committed to his principles. His willingness to face criticism without compromising beliefs left a lasting impression on his family, who learned that integrity and courage often require standing firm even when the world disagrees. Phil Robertson's story offers valuable lessons about resilience, redemption, and the power of faith. His journey from poverty in the Louisiana swamps to international fame demonstrates the importance of hard work, perseverance, and ethical living. His struggles with personal demons show that mistakes and failures can be transformed through reflection, accountability, and spiritual growth. Phil's emphasis on family, tradition, and faith illustrates that true legacy is measured not by wealth, but by the positive impact one leaves on loved ones and community. His letters, guidance, and actions continue to inspire his children and fans worldwide, providing a model for navigating challenges while maintaining moral integrity. Phil Robertson left behind a fortune, yes, but the true wealth was far deeper. His letters, guidance, and moral instruction ensured that his children inherited more than material assets. They inherited lessons, values, and a roadmap for life. From humble beginnings in the swamps of Louisiana to becoming a cultural icon, Phil's life exemplified faith, perseverance, and devotion to family. The tears shed by the Robertson family during the reading of his will reflected not only grief, but gratitude for a father who continued to guide them even in death. Phil Robertson's legacy is a reminder that true inheritance is measured in love, integrity, and the enduring influence one leaves on future generations. His story, a blend of struggle, redemption, faith, and achievement, will inspire and resonate for decades to come. Phil Robertson's story is inseparable from the family that stood beside him. Miss Kay, his wife, was more than a partner. She was a glue that held the household together through decades of struggle, fame, and personal challenges. Married at just 17, she faced the enormous responsibility of raising children while supporting Phil through his early battles with alcohol and anger. Her unwavering support allowed Phil to focus on his work and eventually transform his life. The Robertson children, Alan, Jace, Willie, Jep, and Phyllis, grew up witnessing both the hardships and triumphs of their parents. They learned resilience, resourcefulness, and faith from a young age. Duck Commander was not just a business. It was a training ground for life. Every child contributed to the operation in small ways, whether helping carve duck calls, packaging products, or assisting with orders. Phil's approach to business was deeply intertwined with family values. He emphasized responsibility, discipline, and ethical behavior over profit. By involving his children in Duck Commander, he taught them the importance of hard work, integrity, and collaboration. This foundation ensured that the family could maintain control and continuity of the business, even after the pressures of fame reached their peak. When Duck Dynasty premiered on A&E in 2012, the Robertson family became a household name. Millions of viewers were captivated by the combination of humor, faith, and raw honesty. Phil's presence was magnetic. His long beard, gravelly voice, and straightforward wisdom became iconic. Audiences saw a man who lived exactly as he preached, committed to family, faith, and traditional values. But with the rise in fame came intense scrutiny that in 2013. Phil's interview with GQ sparked nationwide controversy. His statements about homosexuality and race triggered a backlash that threatened his career and the show's success. Yet, instead of retreating, Phil stood firm in his beliefs. He argued that his words reflected scripture and personal conviction, not hatred. This stance divided the public. Some criticized him as intolerant, while others rallied in support of his right to speak freely. The controversy highlighted the delicate balance between personal beliefs and public perception. While challenging, these events reinforced the Robertson family's values: integrity, faith, and courage in the face of criticism. The family learned firsthand that public scrutiny could be managed without compromising personal principles, a lesson that would echo in their personal and business decisions for years to come. Beyond television, Phil Robertson's financial success was a result of decades of strategic work and careful planning. Duck Commander began as a small one-man operation, but through innovation, dedication, and the next generation's input, it transformed into a multi-million-dollar empire. Willie Robertson, in particular, brought new energy and vision to the business, expanding product lines, modernizing operations, and creating opportunities for national recognition. Merchandise, licensing deals, and media appearances contribute significantly to the family's fortune. Duck Commander products became a staple for hunters across the country, and Duck Dynasty's popularity ensured global brand awareness. Phil's approach to wealth was intentional. He emphasized that financial success was a tool to support the family and uphold values, not an end in itself. Every decision, from distribution to marketing, reflected this philosophy. By balancing profit with principle, Phil created a business that was both profitable and morally aligned with his worldview. Phil Robertson's influence extended beyond family and business. Over the years, he became a notable figure in American culture, representing conservative Christian values in a highly publicized way. His endorsements of political figures such as Ted Cruz and Donald Trump demonstrated his willingness to engage in public discourse, often polarizing audiences. His public persona, however, was more nuanced than media portrayal suggested. Phil's outspoken nature was matched by a deep personal discipline and humility. Behind the scenes, he focused on teaching his children, managing the family business, and maintaining spiritual integrity. While headlines often emphasized conflict and controversy, the reality of his life was centered on faith, family, and consistent effort to do what he believed was right. The contrast between public perception and private life added a layer of complexity to Phil Robertson's story, illustrating the challenges of living a life guided by conviction in the public eye. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Phil Robertson's legacy was his ability to communicate enduring values through handwritten letters and personal guidance. In May 2025, after his passing, the family gathered to read his will and letters. These messages went beyond financial inheritance, offering insights into faith, character, and responsibility. Miss Kay received the family estate, a symbol of decades spent building a home and a life together. Alan received Phil's religious writings, emphasizing spiritual reflection and devotion. Jace and Jep inherited shares in Duck Commander, along with responsibilities to preserve family tradition and maintain ethical business practices. Phyllis, newly discovered later in life, received land and heartfelt reconciliation. Willie, who had transformed Duck Commander into a mainstream success, inherited control of the company, with a clear directive to protect faith, family, and legacy. These letters revealed a man who considered the emotional and moral well-being of Ophi's family as carefully as his financial success. They were not just words. They were a roadmap for life, teaching lessons that would influence the Robertson children and grandchildren for generations. The family cried not only because of what they gained, but because of the depth of love, thought, and foresight Phil had embedded in each message. Faith was at the heart of every aspect of Phil Robertson's life. His spiritual awakening in West Monroe transformed his personal trajectory and provided a foundation for Duck Commander and Duck Dynasty. His commitment to Christianity shaped his parenting, business decisions, and public persona. Even when faced with Alzheimer's in his final months, Phil's faith remained unshaken, by embedding faith into business and personal guidance. Phil ensured that future generations would have a moral compass to navigate challenges. His letters, instructions, and example emphasized that integrity, accountability, and devotion to family were more important than money or fame. Faith was both a guiding principle and protective framework, enabling the Robertson family to maintain unity and purpose despite public scrutiny and personal challenges. Phil Robertson's life teaches that true wealth is measured not in dollars but in love, guidance, and moral strength. From a poor boy in the Louisiana swamps to a multimillionaire, cultural icon, and patriarch, Phil's story is a testament to resilience, faith, and integrity. The letters and guidance he left for his children underscore the enduring value of principled leadership and thoughtful stewardship. His fortune, estimated between $10 million and $15 million, was significant, but secondary to the lessons, values, and love he imparted. Phil Robertson's legacy is a combination of triumph, redemption, family devotion, and ethical stewardship. It reminds us that while financial success may fade, the impact of guidance, faith, and integrity lasts for generations. His family cried not just for his death, but for the realization of what it meant to carry forward a life so deeply shaped by faith, sacrifice, and love.